The investigation started and continued, where it led the investigating team to the release now of the two victims. Because of the pressure that was exerted by our investigating team, we saw the ladies released nearby Sulengama police station on 26 September 2024.
Your international story, Hezbollah says the Lebanese resistance fighters have repelled an infiltration attempt by Israeli forces in several southern border areas. Hezbollah said earlier today that its fighters engaged in ground clashes with the regime's infantry and forced them to retreat from the town of Edessa. The fighters then were battling Israeli soldiers who infiltrated the village of Mraan al-Haras. In an earlier statement, Hezbollah said it had forced Israeli soldiers to withdraw after they attempted to infiltrate the border village of Edessa further northeast. The Lebanese army also confirmed that Israeli forces had briefly breached the blue line by approximately 400 meters into Lebanese territory in two areas, then withdrew a short time later. Your weather, 19 degrees, variable conditions. A quick reminder of our top story. Local media says commercial residents in the Ward 45 area has not had water in the last 1 year. That's the news.
This hadith is sponsored by Ashraful Aid, International Humanitarian Organization.
Hadith a day. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم المؤمن مألف ولا خير في من لا يألف ولا يؤلف. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, the believer is one who is sociable, loving and caring to others, and there is no good in a person who is not loving, caring and sociable.
This hadith is sponsored by Ashraful Aid, International Humanitarian Organization.
Are you looking for a meaningful way to fulfill your zakat obligation? Look no further than Ashraful Aid. With our trusted track record, your zakat reaches those who need it the most in the most honorable and dignified manner. Visit our website at www.ashrafulaid.org.
Sunnah a Day, proudly brought to you by Sunpick, 100% pure sunflower cooking oil. Sunpick, cook more with less.
Sunnah a day. After finishing one's meal, one should recite the dua, Alhamdulillahi alladhi at'amana wa saqana wa ja'alana min al-muslimin. All praise is due to Allah, who has fed us and granted us drink and made us from those who submit to Him.
Sunnah a Day, proudly brought to you by Sunpick, 100% pure sunflower cooking oil. Sunpick, cook more with less.
Imagine this. You're putting together a 7-color meal, from the creamy pasta to the glazed carrots and flavorful onion gravy. This entire meal is made with our 100% pure extra virgin olive oil from our La Familia range, bringing outstanding quality and taste to your kitchen. Shop La Familia 100% pure extra virgin olive oil at any leading supermarkets near you. La Familia, heart of the home.
At Amina's Wonder Spice, we know that many of you already enjoy the pleasure of cooking with our 100% pure ginger and garlic. Our unique masala paste have created a new dimension and variety to your dishes. For all these reasons and more, we've called it a Wonder Spice. Amina's Wonder Spice, creating a unique taste in a paste. Available throughout South Africa, neighboring countries, and also in the UK. Contact us on 031 577 5023 or www.aminaspice.co.za.
They convince the world to believe that terrorists look like beards and thobes. Now, as the facade cracks, one martyr after another, the world sees through the broken windows and now knows the true face of terrorism. It wears suits and ties and smiles behind lies.
اللهم احفظ المسجد الأقصى من اليهود الحاقدين. اللهم أعد المسجد الأقصى إلى رحاب المسلمين. اللهم وطهر المسجد الأقصى من اليهود الغاصبين. عليك بهم فإنهم لا يعجزونك يا قوي يا متين اللهم منزل الكتاب مجري السحاب هازم الأحزاب سريع الحساب اهزم اليهود وزلزلهم يا قوي يا عزيز.
Listen to News in Focus on Radio Al-Ansar, Durban 90.4 and Petermarisburg 105.6 FM every Wednesday from 8 p.m. with Yunus Sacoor. That's 8 p.m. every Wednesday. Radio Al-Ansar, keeping you informed.
खुदा ने मुझको दिया तेरे दुआओं से तेरी दुआओं से मिला है जो भी मिला तेरी दुआओं से तेरी दुआओं से तेरी दुआओं से जहाँ जहाँ भी गया दिल जाने लगे जहाँ जहाँ भी गया दिल जाने लगे ये है तेरा मेरा माँ तेरी दुआओं से ये कामयाबियां पे मिले ये कामयाबियां कदम पे मिले नसीब ऐसा मिला माँ तेरी दुआओं से तेरी दुआओं से माँ तेरी दुआओं से तेरी दुआओं से तवाफ में किया तवाफ में किया जो मेरा किया माँ तेरी दुआओं से तेरी दुआओं से माँ तेरी दुआओं से तेरी दुआओं मुझे गिराने पे हासिद हुए मुझे गिराने पे हासिद हुए मैं दुश्मनों से बचा माँ तेरी दुआओं से तेरी दुआओं से माँ तेरी दुआओं से माँ तेरी दुआओं कसम है इसमें उजाले का कुछ कमाल नहीं कसम है इसमें उजाले का कुछ कमाल नहीं उरूज से को मिला माँ तेरी दुआओं से तेरी दुआओं से माँ तेरी दुआओं से माँ तेरी दुआओं माँ की दुआ जिंदगी की दुआ जिंदगी
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Marisburg 105.6 FM, and audio streaming on www.alansar.org.za. The name is Yunus Sacoor, and I will be in your company for the next 2 hours. I will be interviewing our guests shortly. Today, the date is 29th of Rabiul Awal 1446 AH, equivalent to the 2nd of October 2024. On tonight's show, we're going to chat, because it's World's Week, we're going to chat about, the need to have a will in place and estate planning. We're also going to talk briefly about water restrictions to conserve water, because there is concern that the National Department of Water has asked municipalities to implement water restriction programs to conserve water, because the utilization of water from the dams is in excess of what they are allowed to consume, and this is probably because of the need out there, plus also a large degree of water underground leaks, and in eThekwini it's more than 50%. And then we're going to look at the political outlook of South Africa. Now, the reason why I selected this subject is because we have gone through different phases in the political setup, where we had a pre-apartheid setup, and at that stage, the country and indeed Africa was run in a particular manner. And then post-apartheid, we have an interim government in place, and there was basically a follow-up of the pre-apartheid era and the constitutional changes. And more recently, we're back to a government of national unity. And I have distinguished guests in the studio to talk about it, because we are basically trying to work out exactly which direction we as South Africa are going. So with me in the studio, I have, an attorney who is quite competent in dealing with wills and estate planning, Nafeesa Kadwa. Nafeesa is an attorney and practicing in the legal field for over 20 years. She and her experienced team have successfully helped her clients with the legal challenges. She has worked on many challenging and high-profile matters where she has achieved sustainable legal solutions for her clients. And she holds various portfolios, and she's got quite a lengthy CV. So what we'll do is, what we're going to chat to Nafeesa on a subject that she's quite au fait with. She's presented and delivered various workshops on varying matters, and these include property investments, wills and estate planning, which we're going to chat with today. And she'll give us an explanation, what is estate planning. And she's also been the founder of WADE, which is Wills and Deceased Estates, a WhatsApp group created during the COVID pandemic to give support to families who lost their loved ones, with a view to giving support on navigating issues with winding up of deceased estates. And I recall interviewing her during that period where people were dying, quite frequently. I also have with me in the studio Brother Cassim Docrat. Cassim is a well-known personality. He's the former political science lecturer at UDW and a prominent cricket administrator both nationally and provincially. Because we're not into full cricket season, so we're not going to tax Cassim's mind on cricket, other than to check with Cassim that why are the Proteas not performing to the required standard, both against Ireland and also in prior tournaments, including freezing in the last T20 World Cup, where they had the match in the bag against India, and then one miraculous catch and David Miller gave his wicket away. So I think Cassim is still reeling from that victory, that defeat. But he says they're around the corner. But I think more important is he's been quite involved in politics for considerable period of time. So he will go through with us the whole political outlook of South Africa. Later on in the program, we'll be talking to Honorary Mraan Subrathie. He's an MP. He will give us an update on what's happening in Parliament. And then we'll touch on the water restrictions to conserve water in municipalities. So let me introduce my first guest this evening. And I think Nafeesa has been involved in Radio Al-Ansar many a time. She's been having regular programs back in the day. And then because of a busy schedule, she has not been involved too recently. But I thought it would be appropriate. Let's invite her to the studio to chat about a very important subject. Nafeesa, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus, live on Radio Al-Ansar International.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for having me, and indeed a pleasure to address your audience on a critical subject which is relevant to each and every one of us.
Now, Nafeesa, it has been, sort of a practice, particularly amongst our Muslims, that they very lackadaisical in dealing with estate planning. I'm not saying all, but many Muslims, and they seem to think that, listen, when I get old, I will deal with these issues. But, if you look around us, a lot of youngsters are having various types of illnesses and passing on. And many of them are dying intestate, and there's serious consequences. But a lot of families, they own, many assets, but they fail to realize the importance of estate planning. And in terms of Sharia, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam is reported to have said that do not sleep until you have your will in place, until you plan how you're going to pass on your assets to your family should something happen to you, and those that have assets on their name, how to deal with it. So in brief, we have a lot of elderly listeners, both in Durban, Pietermaritzburg, and around, that listen to us, and many of them are widows, some of them are widowers, and some individuals are young as well. And they, obviously, sort of, for some strange reason, it's not high up in the agenda to really ensure that, you do estate planning and have a will in place and adjust that will regularly. So perhaps you just want to briefly highlight to our listeners out there what is estate planning and why there is a need for estate planning.
Yes, Yunus, indeed a very, 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 very critical issue. And each and every one of us must be conscientized of this, because death is an event that affects each and every single one of us. We don't know the age, but we definitely know that. And I always say death is the surest event in life, but least planned for event in life. And when you asked your question, it reminded me that there was recently, I think close to COVID times, a survey that was done at the Master's office, and it was found that a whopping over 70% of deceased estates that were reported intestate, meaning without a will. So that in itself shows you that our communities, our people, don't take this seriously and don't attend to their affairs. Now, on legacy planning and estate planning issues, firstly, I think many of our listeners are Muslims, indeed, and we need to understand that the South African law administers estates in terms of South African law. We as Muslims, it's simple. It's we have no choice, and it's dealt with via the Quranic injunctions, and there are specified requirements and methods of distribution or persons that the distribution has to take place to. However, we've got to balance this with the South African law and make sure that our wills become Sharia compliant, because if you don't leave a will according to Sharia law or Islamic law, then it will be dissolved according to the South African law. Apart from the fact that many of these estates have issues related to distribution to family members, deadlock, lack of funds, and a whole range of issues. Also marriage, lots of times. And for the ladies out there, be conscious. The factual position is that many of our husbands have second or even more wives. And that is something that they are allowed to have, but we must also know how to deal with it so we're not left in a position where we are destitute at the end of the day after the husband passes on. And it comes about from being educating yourself about these issues. Now, you asked about legacy planning or estate planning. And of course, part of this estate planning is the aspect of educating yourself. And then understanding where or what the dynamics of your particular circumstances are. Sometimes there's adopted children, sometimes there's only daughters, and the marriage, the consequence of your marriage is extremely important. So you've got to take all this into account and seek advices and look at how this impacts on you. And many a times I also find that in practice that lots of times, especially females, they are very complacent and they leave everything for their husbands to sort out and resolve. And I'm talking here not only of those who don't have assets, but those who are actually in business too. But the husband is dealing with their financial aspects and they have no idea as to how this must be dealt with on death. Now, that's a responsibility on each person and each soul themselves. And that there's many Quranic ayahs that also refer to this. One has to deal with it themselves. But with estate planning, there are interventions that you could use, tools you can use, things like trusts, powers of attorney, and also adjustments with regards to like donations, with regards to taxes, etc., such that when you've planned your estate, using an expert, not only a financial advisor, but also somebody like an attorney, an expert attorney who helps you with fiduciary matters, who can help to reduce your taxes, reduce the burdens on your estate, because winding up of estates is extremely expensive. Having said that, many a times wives believe that they don't have any assets, but they don't take into account that once the husband passes on, they are most likely entitled to inherit. And then sometimes very shortly after that, the wife passes on and she's now got an estate through her husband, but she might not have made a will. So I think my message here on this point is critical, that from the age of 16, even encourage your children to make a will and to ensure that something is put in place which can be reviewed from time to time as the dynamics of your life evolve or change.
Thanks, Nafeesa, for giving a bit of a summary of what estate planning is all about. Now, I recollect back in the days when I did commercial law and also a course called Administration of Estates, that there is a threshold for reporting to the master an estate. Otherwise, in terms of a particular section, you don't have to go through the process. Is that threshold still applicable? For example, if your assets are worth just one property that's under maybe 300-400, I'm not sure what the figure is, then there's a shortened process of winding up. Like when we were selling properties back in the days in Phoenix and Chatsworth, and we went about the program of creating sectional title transfers, we reminded those beneficiaries then that, listen, if you have no more assets other than this property, then bear in mind that you must ensure that there is a kind of a will that's created, but there's no onerous process of transfer. Perhaps you want to elaborate on that before we come to the real issue of why the need of a will, because this is a wills week and there's an encouragement at the national level for people to be mindful of having wills at all times.
Yes, so the winding up process in South Africa is governed by the Administration of Estates Act. And in terms of that act, it's Section 18.3, which stipulates that if your estate is worth less than 250,000 rands or less, then you are not obliged, or your executor will not be obliged to run the whole process of a winding up of an estate, because estates, there's quite a few processes and quite a few steps to get it to final winding up, and there's quite a few onerous regulations and provisions under which the executor is scrutinized by the Master of the High Court. So if it's a Section 18.3 appointment, where I said it's under 250,000 rands, then the burden is less on the executor. And so, in fact, the executor or the person administering the estate is called a representative, not even an executor, which means that you don't have to go the full length of what is expected or the procedure that is expected of a of a normal estate. However, what is still critical, and for the listeners to understand, is that one still must have a will. Otherwise, it creates problems with intestacy, which intestacy means that you die without a will. And there's complications with regards to who will be your heirs if you haven't nominated your heirs. Who will be your executor? Because obviously you haven't nominated an executor if there is no will. How will this distribution take place? What will happen to minors? And nowadays, it's very common to find younger people passing on. Some are even in their 30s, leaving young children behind. Their assets then get controlled by the Guardian's Fund under the Master's Office. And that might not necessarily be expedient because your funds of minors are stuck there. Whereas if you made a will, you can cater for these types of issues.
Now, just to close up the issue of estate planning, which you highlighted, the simple process of establishing or preparing, your estate planning documents is to work out the assets you have and the liabilities, and how do you decide to liquidate or deal with the assets upon your demise, and that will result in some considerations, as you mentioned, of the tax implications, estates duty tax, etc., and the need to consider whether it's appropriate to have a trust so that not everything comes into your estate. For example, the threshold may be tax or estate duty exemption, maybe 2.5 or 3 million. You can unpack that a little bit later. But when you do the estate planning, you have to ascertain your assets and be mindful of the tax implications and whether there's a need to form a trust. And this is why there's a need to meet with a professional, starting off with the attorney who's au fait with the whole processes. Because in drawing up a will, which we'll cover shortly, the will indicate, who are the beneficiaries. And in terms of Sharia law, a Muslim attorney, or maybe even a non-Muslim, would be able to tell you how to go about that will. But before that, people who have assets and liabilities, how do they simply go about ascertaining that when I'm planning my estate, what do I take into account when meeting the attorney? Because if you've got an asset or a house worth 3 million and you've got a bank balance of over 2 million and you've got shares of another million, then obviously you're well over the threshold of exemption of estate duty. So just briefly, what consideration you keep in mind when, unpacking your estate for planning purposes?
Okay, so I want to answer this question in a different manner and first highlight to the listeners that in fact a huge challenge with many estates is a lack of funds, because the costs involved in winding up an estate are hefty. There's administration costs, which are usually at 3.5% of the value of the estate. Now, you gave an example of a house worth 3 million, or even if it's a house that's worth 1 million. Based on that, what's it? 33,000, 3.5% is what you need to cater for the
35,000.
Yeah, 35,000 rands for the. Assuming it's only
winding
that.
up the estate, that's a fees.
So you've got to cater for that, and sometimes these estates, you find that our elders, they build up property estates, and there's no liquid cash in the estate. So that becomes a huge problem, because then there's no money for even the conveyancing cost, apart from the administration costs. There's no tailor-made solution, but in general, the principles would be one has to look at how you could have liquid or cash flow in your asset portfolio to ensure that your heirs are not having any difficulty. Otherwise, it means your heirs might have to go to a process of getting a bond to finance the costs. And you've heard, I'm sure many of the listeners have heard over the years, there's estates that are 5 years, 6 years, even some of them even 20 years, and they're not even resolved because of all these types of issues.
And that compromises the beneficiaries big time.
Precisely. But the good news is, there are things like policies that can be taken out during your lifetime. But one has to obviously go and see an expert, an attorney, to create these interventions. For example, even the trust is one of the methods, or take out appropriate policies to be able to fund these costs of the estate. Apart from the administration of the estate, you have costs like the estate duty.
Now, what is the threshold for estate duty? How many million?
3.5 million.
So if your asset value is below 3.5 million, you're exempt from estate duty.
Yes, you're exempt from estate duty. However, as I'm saying, the administration costs are high. You'll have conveyancing
So you
costs.
must factor in that.
And the other thing is important is capital gains tax, which also gets quite hefty. Of course, there are some rebates applicable for residential properties where you are living on the property, but there are that. And then, sometimes there might be other costs related to this whole process that might be a little bit beyond the winding up of the estate. For example, if you're getting rental income, then there's it works almost like a letting agency where there's a rental income, so there's a percentage that has to be paid whilst your estate is being wound up. Also, nowadays, with SARS, there might be taxes applicable on your death. You do an e-filing process where you register the estate for tax, and the estate itself is assessed for tax. And without that process, and without having the funds to fund the taxes for SARS, your estate will not be wound up, and you will not get the approvals of the master, and it causes frustrations for the family members. Again, especially where there's minors involved, the difficulty becomes so great for the family members. So it's very critical and important that each and every one must attend to or visit a practitioner, visit an expert, an attorney to get proper legal advices based on their circumstances.
Now, if you want to obviate the need for having assets on your name, obviously we'll discuss that on another day, the issue of forming a trust and transferring these assets to a trust so that you basically have no assets on your name. So there's no need to have an estate wound up. But very seldom this takes place. More often than not, people have one property and some cash and a vehicle. So there's a need for a will. And you mentioned or alluded to the fact that there's a need for an Islamic will, because when you pass on, you don't want to face the consequences in the qabr, because our listeners are predominantly Muslim. And what is the basic explanation of having a will, Nafeesa, so that our listeners are aware of the importance of having a will, both from an Islamic perspective and from a perspective of not delaying a winding up of an estate?
Okay, so with regards to the importance of a will, firstly, as Muslims, and most of us, our listeners would be Muslim, firstly, one needs to or wants to align with the Sharia principles in terms of every aspect of their life. And death is one of your aspects that you got to deal with. And in so doing, so, although there is much recognition for Islamic law in South Africa, the winding up processes, the succession rules do not comply with Islamic law principles. And we know 1/3 of the estate is what you have freedom of testation over. The balance is by Quranic injunction. Generally, the principle is 1/8 to a wife. Where there's a husband, it's 25% to the husband, and balance is by 2 shares to boys and 1 share to females. So in order to get recognition or to recognize that, one has to make sure that this is encapsulated or captured in your will correctly, and the drafting is important. It has to be done properly for the master to acknowledge and accept that will. The other dynamic around this whole thing is to ensure that you go to a will. Lots of times people go and just make their own little hand note, but there are certain regulations which are important to work out whether this is a valid will. Otherwise, it creates lots of disputes and disharmony. And some of these, if I can just refer to, is like it has to be witnessed. It has to be witnessed by 2 competent witnesses. It has to be in writing, your will. So if you just said something to somebody in South African law, that won't necessarily be regarded as valid. And in order to prove that, one would have to make court applications, etc., which burdens your estate even further, and the greater time delays. So from there alone, you can see the complexities involved, and that is the reason it's important to actually sit down with your attorney and express what you want to put down in your will and record those, and make sure that your will is a valid will, and your attorney will make sure if it's signed correctly in front of him or her, then obviously your attorney will take care to make sure that your will gets accepted by the master.
Okay, thank you, Nafeesa. I think you've given us a nice synopsis of estate planning and the need for having a will. We'll pick up later on in the program on 1 to other key issues. And I'm sure there'll be a need for more programs in this regard. But we do have other issues we need to discuss. What we do is we'll take a short break and we'll continue with a little bit of a political discussion, because I want to mix politics with legal today. And I want us to have all-rounders in the studio. So I'm glad we've got all the guests that are quite au fait with the principles. But my guests are listening in very, very carefully to you, because they are wondering, am I on the right track as well? So let's take a break, Monli, and inshallah we'll continue after the break.
We'd love to meet you. Pay us a visit. Radio Al Ansar. Welcome to Simplex Radio. Visit our showroom for the full range of car audio. Our TV department carries top brands with quality LED panels, full HD to Ultra HD, and now the experience of Super Ultra HD. Visit our theater rooms and transform your home with brands like Onkyo, Integra, Denon, Boston Acoustics, Yamaha, and more for quality audio visual experience. Now available, full range of home appliances. A one-stop shopping experience. Call 031-306-4029 or Kenilworth Park, 202 Brickfield Road, Overport. Simplex Radio, the name you can trust.
Would you like to give Sadaqah 365 days a year? You can with the Al Imdad Foundation's Daily Sadaqah program. Donate as little as R1 a day for a month for each member of your family, up to any specified amount, and receive monthly feedback on where your contributions have made a difference. Visit alimdad.com and download your daily Sadaqah debit order form or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Discover Village Meats, where craft, convenience, and taste come together. From the finest cuts to delicious ready-to-cook options, we bring quality to your table every day. Visit us for personalized service and the freshest selection. Elevate your meals with Village Meats, your trusted neighborhood butchery, located at Village Market, Westville. Craft, convenience, taste. That's Village Meats.
Yellow and Sour Helping Hands with Aisha Jamal brings you the Animal Welfare Campaign. Help us make a difference.
Hey, little
Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, verily, there is heavenly reward for every act of kindness done to a living animal. We are in need of cat food, dog food, blankets, shelter, weatherproof kennels, and funds towards the above, as well as towards urgent cases where animals require medical attention. WhatsApp 060-971-9955 or 084-3041-683. Drop-off zone 207 West Road, Overport. Yadul Ansar, making a difference.
Feel good food all day, every day. The Al Ansar Deli, here to tantalize your taste buds. Visit our sit-in deli and try our daily specials at 207 West Road, Overport. Open weekdays 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., Saturdays 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., close on Sundays and public holidays. Call 031-208-1601. Al Ansar Deli, feel good food.
Looking to book a venue for that special occasion? Come and book the Conference Centre on 207 West Road or Community Hall on 189 West Road, which accommodates 120 to 300 people with ample and safe parking. For all your hall requirements, contact the Reservations Department on 031-208-1601 or email us at reservations@alansar.org.za. Save the date. Don't delay. Book away.
Ladies, are you concerned about your health and well-being? Then the Al Ansar Cancer Support Group's annual Cancer Awareness and Chai Day is for you. Dynamic speakers, health and wellness exhibition, an awesome tea garden, lucky draws, free blood pressure and sugar checks, free entry. Join us on Saturday, 12 October 2024 at the Al Ansar Conference Centre, 207 West Road in Overport from 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Let's unite to fight cancer's might. For inquiries, contact Rabina Parak on 082-786-8815 or Zora Jadwat on 08-222-03131.
Radio Al Ansar, Durban, 90.4 FM, Peter Maritzburg, 105.6 FM.
وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين. And we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to the world.
फलक के नजारों ज़मीं की बहारों सभी दे मनाओ हुजूर आ गए
उठो बेसहारो चलो गम के मारो खबर ये सुनाओ हुजूर आ गए हुजूर आ गए.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International, broadcasting in the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Maritzburg 105.6 FM, and streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Before the break, we were chatting with Nafeesa Kadwa on the wills and estate planning, and she gave us a brief outline on exactly how the whole process worked. We'll continue with the discussion later with her, but I want to bring in Brother Cassim Docrat on the issue of the political outlook of South Africa. Cassim, I introduced and mentioned that South Africa went through 3 phases. One was pre-apartheid, then was post-apartheid, and now the GNU. And there were different reactions, and we know corruption and various things have crept in more recently. We do have a politician with us that's present here. He's from the African National Congress, Brother Subrathie. And Imran was fortunate; he joined, the government as an MP in this last elections, and he's part of the GNU. So he'll unpack a little bit on that and give us some updates. But from a political perspective, having been involved in lecturing in political science during the pre-apartheid era, and perhaps, partly during post-apartheid, how do you see the situation? Because a lot of people are asking the question, Cassim, and they make comments like, we were better off pre-apartheid, and the group areas, we were safe, and, the Boer cops were good, but 90% of the population was isolated into the townships. So, some war was brewing as a result, but there was a peaceful transition. So perhaps from your perspective, we've got about 7 minutes. Maybe you can just give from a political perspective with your background, how do you see the 3 different phases? And then maybe we can unpack after the news break the GNU, because there seem to be some positives.
Yeah, I think, firstly, assalamu alaikum to the listeners. And Yunus, thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss the future of, I wouldn't say future of South Africa, but the politics of today. And what I would like to say that, that it's no different how other countries have gone through as far as South Africa is concerned. What we find that, that as you mentioned earlier, that if we take the 3 phases of South Africa, and if we take the early phase of apartheid, right, there was no doubt that South Africa was a very prominent economic member of the
pre-apartheid. Yes.
Pre-apartheid. There was no doubt about it. As much as we, as Black South Africans, detest the relationship which was going on between South Africa and the rest of the world in terms of its economy, but South Africa continued to serve those particular countries, and countries negotiated with South Africa on the economic basis. So that was one particular aspect.
Now, I just want to interrupt there, Cassim, because you're making a very important point. Was that because, and I'm just now looking at the Middle East setup and the way USA, Israel are together, etc. South Africa was partly linked with UK and to a small extent USA. Were those determining factors for the economic situation then? And then post-apartheid, there was a deterioration of the economic setup. Was that linked to the whole process?
I think, one must be able to try to differentiate between political development and economic development within a particular state. And at that particular state, as far as South Africa was concerned, their political turmoil was a black and white issue. But as far as their own issues were concerned, it went along. Unfortunately or fortunately for us, when in 1990, when the ANC took over, and there's no doubt that ANC was our freedom movement, liberation movement, and it got all the support it needed from the people around it, whether it was black, whether it was white, but it got its support. And we supported it because we were now the new democracy, as far as we were concerned in Africa. But the question is that I think that we left it too late to actually manage the ANC. And that was the biggest problem. The ANC continued and we supported it, and we supported it in the past, and there was no reason why not to support it for the future. But unfortunately, the whole system, or one would say the development of politics, changed within the ANC. And when that started changing, the people on the street, the supply chain became a very difficult situation for the ordinary South African. And that is why we find recently that so many other political parties have come into being from the liberation movement. And of course, now we've got the government of consolidated unity or whatever it is. And that is the biggest difference. Now, I want to make a comparison in a little way today that let us take India, the subcontinent, prior 1947, right? And out of that particular partition, we had two nations which came in, India, Pakistan. Now let us say today, where is India and where is Pakistan? India has gone way, way forward. In fact, it's probably better than many, many countries throughout the world. Whereas Pakistan has remained where it is. Why? Because the politics was not clean. It was people who were managing or administrating that particular country were for themselves, for their families, and etc., etc. And unfortunately, I think we are very fortunate, maybe to a certain extent, that we have caught it in the bud, as far as South Africa is concerned, in terms of the politics which we have seen in the last 15, 20 years in this particular country. And fortunately, we've been able to see that type of development which is going on. And that is why South Africa was going backwards. And that is why we are thinking, are we probably poorer nation than any other African nation? And I think that was a sad statement to make for anybody, that a country which was a leader in terms of development, leader in terms of economy, leader in terms of mining, everything it had was suddenly now probably at the bottom of the rank. And I think this is where one must see, was it the politics? Was it political parties? Was it human beings who had different aims and goals? And I think this is unfortunately that it has happened. But I think it has happened, if one may say for the good, it happened, and hopefully it should disappear. But I think the time has come that I think South Africans need to move forward and actually develop this country what it's supposed to be.
Now, I recall that during the pre-apartheid era, when you were electing in UDW, and you had all these so-called activists who were prominent in the ANC, people like late Praveen Gordhan, Yunus Karim, and various other activists that were in UDW during that period, fighting apartheid and strongly opposing the policies of the country, working out strategies to bring South Africa, create the freedom, etc. Now, the last when I interviewed you, you obviously, when you were lecturing to these students, you were getting these questions because political science was about, how should politics work in a country? And there should be a democracy that, everybody should have an opportunity to vote. Now, from that era to now, maybe, just briefly, Cassim, if you can just highlight what were the salient differences or what are the salient differences, because you still have political science being studied at your university. So what are briefly the differences?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I remember the late Praveen Gordhan, who was also a student with me at as I call it, the island, the Salisbury Island, where the University College for Indians was. And of course, Praveen was also a student there at that time, with a number of people which you have just mentioned, Yunus Karim and others. I think the goals were different. The aims were different. We were fighting for freedom. We were fighting for a democratic state. And I think we were focused in that particular. I think the question of where we belong or who we belong to was not the question. We had a common enemy. And the common enemy was white domination. And that particular structure had to be removed at all costs. And that is where black people, whether it be Indian, colored, African, etc., we all sat together and moved forward in one particular direction. And that is why the ANC has tremendous support, both inside and externally, because it was to find a democracy for the people of South Africa. And that is why we find that when, of course, the change did come about, the only party we knew was the ANC. Yes, of course, there was the Pan-African Congress and others, they were there. But it was the African National Congress under Nelson Mandela and others. And we were able to support it. it is unfortunately that the politics changed as we developed into a more independent state. And that is where, of course, I think the problem, that is where the changes started coming. And then we had to look at how do we survive economically, socially, where do we stay? So this is where the problem, I think if you look at it previously, I mean, since we are put in various compartments, as you would say, Indians, coloreds, Africans, whites, etc. Today, there's no such thing, right? As much as you may feel that there are certain communities, maybe the white community would like to retain as much as they can. But today, you can live anywhere, you can stay anywhere, you can study anywhere, and it's there. You know what I mean? Of course, economic differences will be there between you and me and others at the same time. But the point is, you have the opportunity to do what you want to do. And that is the big difference, what of yesterday than today. But unfortunately, the management and the administration of that development has not been smooth. And this is where I think every South African will question, were we better off in the past or we are better off now? There's no doubt we are better off now. There's no question about that. It's how we will have this, let's just say, turmoil, disturbances as we go on. But I think the major part of it has been left behind now. And I think we need to move forward.
Okay, I think, Cassim, you've given us a bit of a synopsis of the past, the previous, and this current situation. And we have with us in the studio, Brother Imran Subrathie, who is in the current situation. We'll unpack that after the news break. We'll take a news break and inshallah we'll unpack that.
An informative Islamic global perspective. This is Al Ansar News.
Making news this hour, the 2nd of October. The news from Durban 90.4 FM, Pietermaritzburg 105.6 FM. Kwamashu residents beam on water crisis, America Monina. Local media says Kwamashu residents in the Ward 45 area has not had water in a year now. Community member Kulegani Mtembu says with water restrictions announced by the Tigwini municipality in the horizon, their plight will be exacerbated. He's explaining.
The problem in these areas is because of their infrastructure. Their infrastructure is very, very damaged, and they have to rectify. And the number of society, the citizens, and it's raised the concern that even the illegal connections of the waters is also affecting that water supply. So now, since they brought up that this program that there will be no water for the next 12 months, there will be shortage of water. That is our concern, because for almost a year we have no water. But hopefully that meeting that will take place tomorrow will come up with the solutions and the turnaround strategies in terms of tangible solutions for the community. Because we've got other people who've got underlying conditions. Water is a very basic need that you require every time in an hour a day. You can't survive without your water. So that is our concern as a community of our Mashu and section.
More news of funeral service for Pietermaritzburg woman who was killed when a car battery smashed through a windshield is held today. Madhu Banwari and her family were returning home from a funeral in Phoenix last Sunday when the incident took place on the N3 in Westfield. Mourners filled the hall in Racetop to say their final goodbye. The head of the KwaZulu-Natal Community Safety Department, Glenn Rose Makata, shared a message from the Premier Tamin Tuli, which read that he invites all stakeholders, religious groups, private businesses, neighborhood watch groups, and individuals committed to peace to partner with the provincial government in fighting such incidents of criminality. More news, the Game Rangers Association of South Africa says more strategies are needed to combat threats to protected wildlife. The association's Nick Funda has been commenting on the sentencing of two former Kruger National Park rangers. He says Lucky Mckenzie and Joe Shilangu were handed down 20-year sentences last week for their involvement in the poaching of rhinos. Report says that the duo was arrested in 2019. Founder of the Game Rangers Association says the courts can help win the fight against rhino poaching. In more news, the three people arrested for kidnapping Elise van der Merwe and a Chinese woman appearing at the Port St. John's Magistrate Court in Eastern Cape Vandermeer was kidnapped on the 20th of September, and the other victim, a Chinese national, had been kidnapped 3 days before her. Both women were dropped off at the Solangama police station last week. The kidnappers demanded ransom, but it was never paid. NDPA and Flaguvana of the Hawks in the Eastern Cape wades in.
Our intensive investigation started immediately when the case of a kidnapping was opened. Then it is alleged that during that period, the investigating team of the Hawks, in collaboration with South African Police Service and other law enforcement agencies, started the investigation, where we have arrested a gentleman at Kadwa who was driving a suspected vehicle that was suspected to have been involved in that kidnapping of a lady in Elliot and Party East. The investigation started and continued, where it led the investigating team to the release now of the two victims because of the pressure that was exerted by our investigating team. We saw the ladies released nearby Sulengama police station on 26 September 2024.
Your international story, Hezbollah says the Lebanese resistance fighters have repelled an infiltration attempt by Israeli forces in several southern border areas. Hezbollah said earlier today that its fighters engaged in ground clashes with the regime's infantry and forced them to retreat from the town of Edessa. The fighters then were battling Israeli soldiers who infiltrated the village of Mraan al-Haras. In an earlier statement, Hezbollah said it had forced Israeli soldiers to withdraw after they attempted to infiltrate the border village of Edessa further northeast. The Lebanese army also confirmed that Israeli forces had briefly breached the blue line by approximately 400 meters into Lebanese territory in two areas, then withdrew a short time later. Your weather, 19 degrees, variable conditions. A quick reminder of our top story. Local media says commercial residents in the Ward 45 area has not had water in the last 1 year. That's the news.
Education, health, dignity, empowerment. These wishes all begin with water. Africa Muslims Agency is committed to providing clean water to the thousands who still live without this basic human right. Support us in giving the best of charities. Provide a water well for 16,500 Rand or a borehole for 55,000 Rand in Afghanistan or 65,000 Rand in Africa. Gain Thawabi Jariyah and help communities to reach their full potential. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
This segment is brought to you by Kenfield Auto, your RMI approved service and repair specialist. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Kenfield Auto.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين.
Car won't start?
Kenfield Auto.
Noisy brakes?
Kenfield Auto.
Due for a service?
Kenfield Auto. Kenfield Auto, the answer to all your car problems. Your service and repair specialist for your VW, Audi, Suzuki, Toyota, or just about any vehicle. Kenfield Auto, your RMI and insurance approved workshop to handle them all. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Call us on 031 207 2399. Kenfield Auto. Welcome to Simplex Radio. Visit our showroom for the full range of car audio. Our TV department carries top brands with quality LED panels, full HD to Ultra HD, and now the experience of Super Ultra HD. Visit our theater rooms and transform your home with brands like Onkyo, Integra, Denon, Boston Acoustics, Yamaha, and more for quality audio visual experience. Now available, full range of home appliances. A one-stop shopping experience. Call 031 306 4029 or Kenilworth Park, 202 Brickfield Road, Overport. Simplex Radio, the name you can trust. This dua to protect the heart is brought to you by Continental Butcher Baker Deli. Quality, freshness, and value. Our promise to you since 1992.
ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب.
If you're looking for a delicious selection of freshly made baked goods, decadent deli treats, and succulent meats, there's no need to chop around anymore. Continental Butcher Baker Deli offers an award-winning service, presenting exceptional quality at competitive prices. Superb choice-grade lamb, beef, and chicken, mouth-watering homemade processed meats and gourmet marinades, and scrumptious baked goodies. Quality, freshness, and a money-back guarantee. Continental Butcher Baker Deli in Argyle Road. Visit continentaldeli.co.za.
Call 031-208-0951.
Join Huda SA as we raise funds to complete phase 2 of the finishes of the Ilovo Masjid construction. We humbly request your generous Sadaqah Ejariya and Lillah donations. Your contribution helps build a masjid and earn everlasting rewards. For more information, contact Huda SA on 031 271 3049 or visit www.huda-int.org. Act now and earn your share of sawab. Donate today. Huda SA, building communities, strengthening faith.
Radio Al-Ansar.
निगाहें झुकाओ हुजूर आ गए 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 हुआ चार सूर है मतों का बसेरा उजाला उजाला सवेरा 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 हलीमा को पहुंची खबर आमिना की मेरे घर में आओ हुजूर आ गए हैं हुजूर आ गए 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 abundant satisfaction.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Marsburg 105.6 FM, and streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Before we commence our discussion, I want to acknowledge the large number of listeners that are taking us live on Facebook and YouTube. Your sort of crossing over is much appreciated. Do continue to catch a listen to us. Cassim, I want to get back to you briefly. You want to chat briefly about, the Government of National Unity, which has made enormous strides. So what I want you to do is just give us a brief explanation on your take on the GNU, but at the same time, I want you to also cover that the decline in the support of the ANC is not attributable to the party itself. It's attributable to more the members that have caused the problem over the last 15 years that you were talking about. Perhaps you just want to cover that aspect as well.
Yeah, I think as we've gone through the first phase, one would say that there was no doubt that when the ANC came into power or brought us freedom or brought us a constitutional democracy, it was well received. And one had looked forward for the future of South Africa. Unfortunately, there were issues, there were problems. one would say not with the manifesto of the ANC, but to understand that there are every political party will have people and with different agendas. And you find that the ANC had a couple of breakaways since then. And in that particular breakaways, either people could not conform or felt that ANC was not the right vehicle to take it to the next level. It happened, but still I believe that ANC has a big role to play in the future of this particular country. And especially recently with this whole question of a government of national unity. Now, a lot of people say, what is an alliance? What is it? Practically the whole of Europe virtually runs on alliances, on national unities and things like that. And so it's nothing new in terms of political development or a political strategy. And I think personally that what has happened in South Africa, it has happened for the good. It has brought, if one just look at between the ANC and the DA, miles apart. We never thought before that the ANC would sit with the DA or the DA would sit with the ANC. But fortunately, I think that what has happened is that the future of South Africa, the stability of South Africa, the recognition of South Africa is more than important than any other individual party. And it is in that particular score, I think that there's a great future in South Africa. I think the maturity has finally come in as far as our political scenario is concerned. And I believe that I think there's a way forward now. There's an opportunity now to get things right. And you can see recently already service delivery, the question of issues which have been taken now is much more effective than it was taken before. Of course, as you had mentioned earlier, talking about the water crisis, the electricity crisis, I think there was no need for that. But it came because of mismanagement, people who were not expertise to handle those portfolios were given those opportunities to run, and we saw what a mess we have made ourselves in that particular score. But I don't think it's the end of the world. Many countries have gone through worse. Even the United Kingdom, even Great Britain have their problems. America has their problems today. So let us accept those things. But the question now is, this government of national unity must deliver, and that is important.
Some very pertinent comments Cassim has made, where we have to understand the whole issue of GNU. It's not simple like what the EFF and other parties are saying, that the ANC, landed themselves into a mess. We have to realize that you've got to take the course that's going to be best for the country. And you mentioned political maturity. But I want to bring in Honorable Member of Parliament, Mraan Subrathie, who's recently joined Parliament. He's also the Secretary General of United for Palestine. Mraan, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome again to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Yunus, to you and your listeners, and Jazakallah for having me in your show today again.
Mraan, before I ask you to comment, because I know you've joined Parliament, during this current cause that is part of the GNU, and you'll be the, important person to give us an update on the functioning of the GNU. But before we do that, last week you were in Cape Town, and indeed you're back in Durban. And I know there's a special reason why you're in Durban, because you obviously got to take care of your constituency. Perhaps you just want to explain us, exactly, what plan of action you have in Durban and how do you set up your constituency office?
Jazakallah, Yunus. Yes, that's exactly why I'm in Durban. A parliamentarian's responsibilities are divided into two. A parliamentarian has responsibilities in national parliament, which takes the form of either being in plenary or in the House, or we are involved in committees. And approximately 2/3 of the parliamentary calendar is dedicated to work that takes place in Cape Town in Parliament. And of course, that's where we get involved in issues such as legislation. And approximately 1/3 of our time, of parliamentarians' time, is dedicated to what we call constituency work. And in simple terms, it is where we connect with the people that voted us into power, or we connect with the people of South Africa, or we make ourselves accessible and available to deal with issues concerning our people. And that's exactly what I am on. I am on what we call on constituency period in Durban, wherein my party has allocated to me, they've defined the geographical area that I've been waiting for where my constituency will be, and alhamdulillah, I've been allocated the Durban CBD and surrounding areas. Today, I met the field worker that is being deployed to my constituency office. We had a lengthy discussion in which we outlined our vision, and I indicated to him that we want our constituency office to be the number one constituency office. It must be an epicenter of service excellence to our community, because I think our people have been for long been deprived. There's been a disconnect between our people and what happens in Cape Town in Parliament. And there's a very strong focus from my party, and I think from other parties as well, that the time has come for us to connect Parliament to the people. So you're going to see a very great focus on the constituency office, and you will find various amounts of services will be offered over there. Issues such as assisting in grants, issues such as assisting in bursaries, in NISFAS, in various types of community work. Where communities are failing, they will come to us, and using our parliamentary responsibilities and relationships, we'll try and intercede to try and fix problems. So that's what I am on. Inshallah, my office is being sourced at the moment. It will be a brand new constituency office that is being established, because we don't have a constituency office in the Durban CBD. So inshallah, my office will is in the process of being established, and that is why I'm here in Durban.
Shukran. Coming back to the GNU, and Cassim, Docrat made some very important comments, which obviously many of our listeners may or may not be aware that this situation is highly prevalent in a lot of European countries and in other democracies. And when the decision was taken to have the GNU, it was done in the interest of the country. Now, you've been in Parliament for a couple of months and will pick up the positive impact of this GNU. Perhaps you just need to highlight some of the issues where there's been an improvement in administration at a national level. You can just highlight to our listeners areas where you've picked up in your term of office that definitely there's a positive impact of the GNU. Forget about all the negative comments that are being made by the opposition parties.
I think first thing we must understand, and we've got a lawyer in here, and is that the GNU is not we live happily ever after relationship. It's not that. We have political parties that have divergent and different ideologies, and that is a gross reality of it. We have different ideologies, but it is a marriage of convenience. It's a marriage of convenience where we have come together and said, let's set aside our differences, knowing that it exists. Let's agree to disagree, and let's set it aside, and let's work for the greater good of the people. And that mindset necessarily requires us, therefore, in our committees, because that's where all the work takes place. And of course, it would be happening. That's where it takes place. It necessarily requires us to set aside our differences, to collaborate, to communicate, and to find middle ground between the GNU partners. And that's what it finds. And I think, and I've mentioned this repeatedly, it now requires us to differentiate ourselves based on our work ethic, based on merit, based on our performance, rather than based on what was probably in the past a majority. If you're sitting in the majority, irrespective of whether people agree or disagree, your majority will rule. Now you have to collaborate. You have to present a business case. And I think that's forcing everyone to work and work hard and work effectively. So yes, it's working, alhamdulillah. I've seen the manifestation of it. And I think our economist is here. He'll probably tell us, I mean, for the first 3 months, they say first 100 days in office, petrol prices has probably going to be as low as it's been in March 2022. Interest rate has dropped by 0.25 points. The rand dollar was sitting at 17.11 cents. I checked a few days ago. Inflation is sitting at 4%. So if you look at it economically and financially, the country is really on a roll. So alhamdulillah, and that's one of the telltales that whatever we are doing in Parliament it's starting to manifest itself in the economy, the Yunus.
Oh, thanks, Imran. I want to bring in Hassan. Hassan, South Africa will need to expedite reforms that can boost economic growth to sustain investor inflows that have flooded in since formation of a coalition government, according to the world's largest investment banks, now the GNU. Since the ANC aligned with business-friendly parties after losing its outright majority in May 2019 elections, South African markets have been on a tear. I think we spoke about it last week. The rand has gained 5% to the dollar. Local currency bonds have outpaced all peers in an emerging market index, with returns of 24% in greenback terms. And the Johannesburg Stock Exchange has hit successive record highs, delivering a 15.7% return in dollar terms. Deputy President Paul Mashatile and a delegation of ministers are in London this week to secure fresh capital from the likes of JP Morgan Chase and Company and Goldman Sachs. Investors will continue to look favorably on Africa's most industrialized economy if it can improve the generation capacity at its state-owned power utility and fix its fraying port and rail operator. JP Morgan strategist David, as I said, at an event at the London Stock Exchange on Tuesday. So there is positive sentiment worldwide, and this is all as a result of the impact of the GNU. Now, today, Hassan, the price of petrol has dropped by over a rand, which brings it down to 4 rand in the space of 4 months. And then the markets have, moved quite high, record highs. And everything is on a positive outlook. From an economic perspective, are you seeing improvements every month? And do you foresee the outlook being quite positive for the rest of the year?
Assalamu alaikum to the listeners as well there. I think, we've been now, I see there was an article earlier today or yesterday about 100 days in the GNU. A lot of the mainstream media that's been coming out, they're attributing a lot of the positive momentum that we've had in terms of both the financial markets and also some economic uptick that we've seen, mainly to the GNU. But there are other aspects which we have also attributed to, firstly, certain of the older government, which there's certain things were put in place, but also things out of our control. So financial markets, by a large extent, the currency and the local equity markets have been driven a lot by out of our control. The rand has strengthened to a large extent by US dollar weakness. So US dollar has effectively weakened not only against the rand, but it has weakened against all major currencies globally over the last 2 months. So it has against all major currencies. And the main reason for that is because the US Reserve Bank, or their Federal Reserve as they call it, we have what we call is the South African Reserve Bank here, they cut their interest rates recently by 0.5%. When people cut rates, people tend to move money out and put it into more risky assets. South Africa, being an emerging market, is viewed as a slightly more risky asset. So the rand benefits, our commodities benefit. So you've seen uptick in terms of commodity prices, platinum, gold, iron ore, all commodities that we export out of this country, their dollar prices have picked up, which is fantastic for the country. Secondly, our rand has also increased. So while the exporters may not benefit much from the strengthening rand, but our importers, so we're importing oil. Oil is one of our biggest imports into the country. And the fact that oil prices are coming down and the rand is strengthening is fantastic for the country because consumers benefit. As you said, a 4 rand impact. A foreign impact is massive in terms of the consumer. That's close to 20% year on year that they're benefiting in terms of the petrol price. And remember, petrol price is not only what you're paying just out of your pocket to fill up your car or what you're paying to travel by bus or taxi. It's a related impact across many products and services throughout the economy, whether it's food or services. They're all related impact for that. So you are seeing that's why inflation has been coming down quite nicely over the last few months. And in fact, now below 4.5%, which is the target of the Reserve Bank as well. So I think, yes, we've had a good momentum over the last few months. The GNU has played a part. The GNU has definitely played a part in terms of providing the stability that foreign investors and local investors want. They want to see a government of stability and a bit of certainty. And that has seen, yes, you've had some frictions and the like within the GNU current, whether it was the Bela bill, last minute, on the day, the signing, the president signed, but there was 2 concessions made where he's given reprieve for a period of time for 2 certain, 2 rules within the bill, but by and large, he signed. And there are certain other things which there are certain frictions. But by and large, most of the ministers that have been put in place are making an effort and are making a positive impact. Whether it's our Park Stow going with the president to, recently to the US, they were also to China. You're seeing now Paul Mashatile in the UK. They're targeting the big economic countries where we have big trade relationships with. US is our big one. China is our big. Those are the 2 biggest. US and China are our biggest trading partners by a long margin. And you see the president has made those 2 countries first on his visit in the past month. Tells you importance of building the trade relationships with our big trading partners. Paul Mashatile in the UK, another big trading partner of South Africa, pushing the same agenda, focus on South Africa is open for business. So I think they're looking at attracting foreign investment. You are slowly starting to see projects being announced and being implemented and executed in South Africa in terms of foreign companies coming into the country. Secondly, local companies. Local companies are now confident. You can see there's an optimism within local businesses and also within local consumers. Local businesses, many companies were reporting results over the last few weeks. Sanlam CEO, you had Adrian Gore that was at a function. There was a few of them every one of them had a bit more confidence and optimism in terms. Obviously, Adrian Gore is a lot more cautious around the NHI. Again, one of the friction points that will still continue over the next couple of months. But majority of them talking with a bit more confidence. They're highlighting the challenges, but there's a bit more confidence with them, and they're focusing on talking about bigger growth. In fact, government highlighted for the first time in what a long time, they're looking at the end of 2025, early 2026, hitting past 3% type of GDP growth. In the past decade, besides the year after COVID, was this when we had that, when we had a real slump and then we had the jump, but our average growth in the past decade was just over 1%. If we can get to 3% growth consistently over a period of 4 to 5 years, the impact of that in terms of employment is massive. You're talking over 1 million jobs in 1 or 2 years and potentially more after that. But the related impact in terms of, remember, more money into the consumer's hands, more spending, better for the economy, more money into the tax revenues via VAT and the like. It's a cycle that just adds on and has a positive impact on that. So local businesses are coming through. And fortunately, there was Durban. Alhamdulillah, we're getting some benefit. Tourism is a big area for us. It's still, for me, it's still one of the largest untapped potential for as a municipality and a province, which there's huge potential. Compares to Cape Town. Cape Town, everybody, there's talk about Cape Town and everybody likes to just market Cape Town as being the fantastic destination. It's a very beautiful city, and no doubt it's got the mountain, the sea, everything. Durban's got fantastic coastline. It's got the best weather in the country. Throughout the year, we've got the best weather by far throughout the country. If we just sort out a few things, crime, especially on the Golden Mile, and you sort out, get the crime under control. Get the city a bit cleaner. Get the water. We had, what they call them blue flag beaches for many years until the last 2 or 3 years when it deteriorated. And you get that right, we'll improve. Southern Sun has now signed a 50-year lease with the eThekwini municipality. They're going to refurbish again Ilangeni Hotel. They're going to refurbish the Maharani. They're going to refurbish the Edward and the Garden Court South Beach at about R1 billion over the next few years. Again, that's a positive impact, attracts tourists back into the Durban beachfront, the Golden Mile, more money coming into the city. One last point, Yunus. Government is largely an enabler of business. They're not a large creator of employment, although they've tried, but largely their focus must be enabling. And to do that, they need to make sure that services that are provided are efficient, cost effective, and are running effectively. Two areas that could hinder our growth and our growth prospects going forward. The one is around services, around electricity. But I think that hurdle we to a large extent have been there. But the issue still is Eskom is looking at a 36% increase that they're proposing for the year ahead. You cannot have that. That again just puts us on the back foot. It impacts consumers, it impacts businesses, it impacts everybody. You cannot, and I think government is practical and they're realistic. And I think they will show. So Minister Ramakgopa talked about that they could intervene and propose a more manageable type of increase on that there. Secondly, water. You saw eThekwini highlighting that the Department of Water and Sanitation is talking about rationalizing water in eThekwini. Joburg is in chaos at the moment in terms of water. They're already going through a massive crisis. Remember, South Africa, in terms of water scarcity, we're 30th in the world in terms of being a low scarce water country. And for us, as in Durban and eThekwini, to lose 56% of the water that you're generating through leakages and theft and the like is unacceptable by any measure. To put it into context, 10 years ago, that number was just over 30%. We're now at 56%. Because of the aging infrastructure, the poor skills and the like that has happened, that cannot continue to go at that rate. The municipality loses lots of revenue, huge amounts of revenue is being lost, and at the same time, they're now having to spend more and more to try and rectify the issue. Water and electricity, stability in those two key utilities drives consumers, drives businesses. And then largely within the space in terms of services is the transport sector around the ports and the rail and the roads. Again, we're seeing some positive momentum. Transnet has had good appointments in terms of the new management, and you're slowly seeing some improvement in terms of the ports and the congestions improving. The rail is still going to take some time. But the rail, to just give you an idea of what benefit it could have for us, if we pick the production in terms of iron ore, platinum, coal and the like picks up, the amount of that we can export could increase from what we've seen last year and the year before in terms of the rail. It could potentially increase 20 to 30%. The benefit of that in terms of hard currency coming back into the country and our tax revenues is massive. So those are areas which government has to focus and make sure that getting those areas improvement and efficient and cost effective over the next 2 years or 3 years lays a fantastic foundation for this country to see growth of 3% plus over the next couple of years.
Some very important comments, Hassan, that you made from an economic perspective. I just want to just add a bit of information on the water restriction. Durban to face water rationing for at least the next 12 months, Cassim. So that's the negative news. It's indications are that Durban, the city with one of the highest rates of water loss in South Africa, and Hassan mentioned 56%, will start squeezing the taps of residents from next week after receiving a directive from the National Department of Water and Sanitation to chop consumption by 8.4%. Now, our mayor, Cyril Kaba, told a council meeting on Monday that new water restrictions on the metro would come into effect on the 10th of October. So we got to watch the usage. This comes after the city received a government directive that requires the metro to reduce its water consumption by 8.4%, which is 118 milliliters per day over the next 12 months at least. Now, consumers will want to know the details. The full details of the rationing plan have not been announced yet, but there were indications that the plan could include shutting of reservoirs in selected residential areas once consumption exceeds its stipulated daily limit, along with additional reductions in water pressure and possible installation of more water restriction washers on household meters, as happened during the 2016 drought. So there's various measures that the municipality will be looking at, but briefly, some of the measures include the following: water rationing where demand was too high or exceeds available supply, the installation of restrictors in water meters, and we had that before, pressure reduction as measures in the reticulation network, metering all unmetered consumers, improving turnaround time in repairing leaks and pipe bursts, community education on water conservation, disconnection of illegal connections. Now, these were contributing factors, the underground leaks, etc. And the city got to look at it critically. So we will cover more of that, the water restrictions and all these type of things in future programs. But I want to bring Nafeesa in. Nafeesa has been sitting patiently listening to the political sentiments and economic outlook. Just to sum up on your side, Nafeesa, you mentioned, before I pulled you off and went to the other guys, was the need to ensure that everybody, depending on what the value of your assets are, and even if your assets are not of high value, there's a need to have a will, because if you don't have a will, intestate kicks in and you could violate Sharia. And at the same time, you could also compromise your beneficiaries in terms of they're running their affairs, because you mentioned a lot of women folk that are widows have not been involved in the economic activities of the household. And suddenly, when the male suddenly passes on, they don't know which way to turn, how to pay for the electricity and water. These stop orders are all stopped, etc. So what's your advice to people facing these issues well before something happens, that they must make sure that they do the brief estate planning, they prepare the will, but don't be afraid of going to a competent professional to get the advice and ensure that you're ready, in all aspects. Perhaps your concluding comments, Nafeesa.
Jazakallah, Yunus. Yeah, it's very, very welcoming to hear the positive comments from the parliamentary member in our studio, talking of positive delivery. Positive delivery of government manifestations, and also equally welcoming to hear of the positivity from the Economist in our studio. However, as individuals, I think it's very, very important to prioritize estate planning and and plan it wisely and protect your hard and earned assets. And just a few guidelines in doing this is, sit with the family, create comprehensive budgets for tracking expenses and taking into account inflation. And things like the Economist spoke of regarding the increase in unexpected increases in lights and water, etc. Then you've got to look at debt management plans. You've got to look at savings and investments so that you can create an emergency fund for on the death of your breadwinner, as well as during these difficult periods of time. So, estate planning is not something that kicks in only on the date of death or deals with aspects after death, but also pre-death. So I like to call it legacy planning, because it's you planning for a lifelong scenario, not just for after death. The other point I'd like to mention is perhaps what is important also is to consider insurances and risk management policies and things like that. All this with your professional for tax efficient savings and retirement planning, and regular reviews and updates of your wills. Most importantly, I think continuously educate yourself on updating yourself on what's the new, what's current, what's happening, how you can adjust your plans. Because lots of people think you do a will once off and it's done, it's over. But change of circumstances require updating, and it's becoming more prevalent nowadays, with the change being now a constant. And finally, I'd like to impress upon the listeners that they must seek appropriate industry advices from appropriate professionals, such as financial planners, as well as attorneys. I do have, as you mentioned earlier, a support group called WADE, which stands for Wills and Deceased Estates. And I'm happy for the radio station to share that information where they can get onto the support group and then, seek advices through that as well.
Important information and advices by Nafeesa Kadwa, the attorney who's quite au fait with estate planning and wills. She just gave us a summary of what's required. There's more information we need to unpack in future interviews with Nafeesa. We certainly will invite her in the studio to unpack the different types of successions, intestate and others, and from an Islamic perspective, why it is important to take into account every investment and asset and the need to form trusts and how the tax savings impact on those issues. So we will unpack that, Nafeesa, in future programs, because what you did is, because of this being the Will's Week, the need to ensure you have a will and don't take it lightly, because when something happens, then, a will is not in place. It creates all kinds of problems. Cassim, I want to bring you in. We away from closing. You've brought in a lot of positive advice on the 3 phases, including the current GNU. And I think you've assured our listeners who were being confused by the likes of Action SA, the EFF, and MK that the GNU is a waste of time. The ANC shouldn't have gone that route. Yet, it is quite common in a lot of countries and have been highly successful. And at the end of the day, a government must be formed to benefit the people that live there. And this is what our constitution says. This is what the Freedom Charter said. There are lots of challenges in South Africa, but if we're going in the right direction for the benefit of the people, then we've eventually got into the right track. We are beginning to control maladministration and corruption. And the government is serious about ensuring improvement in service delivery, because we've been chatting about service delivery in municipalities, and we'll unpack that in future programs. But your concluding comments, Cassim?
First, I'd like to appreciate from our brother in Parliament,
Imran,
Brother Imran, the whole question of connectivity. I think the very important aspect of life is to connect. If you take 30 years behind, me and you, if you went overseas, and the first thing the custom officer would tell you, you come from Mandela country.
Right.
And immediately when that was given, it connected you to South Africa. And that was an important sort of satisfaction to you to be part of this bed. And I think recently, after a period of time, that connectivity between Parliament and the man on the street was disappearing. And I think with some positive things which are coming through at the moment, people would like to see more of that. I mean, I'm living in an area where I probably never met the local representative in council or whatever it is for many, many years. But suddenly, recently, one phone call and the man is there. What's the problem? What's the issue? Whether water, lights, roads, etc. So you get the feeling that you need to connect. Don't let him only wait for you to come and ask for your vote. It's also for you now to connect to him. And by you doing that, it also makes you familiar with what is going around. So, as I said earlier, that this whole question of national unity has given us a new dimension of change. And that is important for the sake of this country. As the Economist also said, our brother has said, that things have changed very recently. It's in a couple of months ago, we were still in the doldrums. But suddenly things have started moving in that. It is for us, the people, to grasp this and to support those who are in Parliament to bring change for the good of the people.
Imran, I need to bring you in again. I know that you are forming a constituency office, and you're going to work closely, with the constituents. We saw recently a poster of a webinar you hosted yesterday. Can you tell us about it, Imran?
Well, sorry, Yunus, as I mentioned to you in one of my your previous shows, that part of my deployment in National Parliament is I am the whip of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies. And as a whip of the study group, my task is to encourage leadership and encourage thought, thinking, and research. And yesterday's webinar explored the digitization of the South African ecosystem to create an environment of digital literacy amongst our people, to create a digital ecosystem. And we had various role players and experts in the field. There's one particular Dr. Mwala was there. I think he is the professor in the United Nations University. You know, we had some experts, and the whole conversation was talking to the apex priorities and the challenges we face as outlined by the president in his State of the Nation address. And that is, how do we reduce unemployment? How do we reduce poverty? And how do we create an ethical and able state, development state? So those are three apex priorities. So the message I've been advocating in Parliament is that whatever we do in our committees, and this is a lesson in life, you know, whatever you do, don't work in abstract. Aim for the target, and the target in our country is we need to improve employment, need to reduce unemployment, we need to reduce the cost of living, and we need to develop an ethical state. So yesterday's webinars connected the dots. How do we create a digital environment, improve digital literacy in the context of improving employment, in the context of improving service delivery? I also brought in the dimension of service delivery. How can we use digitization? Like yesterday, in terms of employment creation, I mean, I use a lot of Uber and Bolt now in Parliament. There's no need for me to have a vehicle anymore. It is literally, I mean, I'm so au fait with the app. It's improved my ability to traverse with minimal fuss. Sometimes I lived I would have never traveled to arrive in Cape Town at 10:30 at night and looking for a taxi, but I have the confidence because of the technology. So, and there's many people, when I chat with the guys and the Uber drivers and the Bolt drivers, many of them would have been unemployed. But because of the technology that has been created, they are now earning reasonable incomes. You know, some of them earn up to about 15,000, 20,000 rand, a living wage they're making in life. So alhamdulillah, digitization is there. So yesterday, to answer your question, as the whip of the study group on communications, the digital technology, this was the first, I think, again, this is part of this renewal process. This is part of this renewed energy that we bring to this. I would say this is the first of the study groups in this parliament that actually convened this type of conversation to explore possibilities and link digitization to addressing issues of employment and poverty alleviation.
Excellent. Just one final question, and I'm quite appreciative you come to the studio and respond at such short notice, and you're always giving us up-to-date information, which is valuable for our listeners. Just to switch away from local politics towards what's happening in Gaza, what is the plan for 1 year of genocide in Gaza? I know this weekend there is a march taking place. Perhaps you just want to give us a brief report on that issue, Imran?
Yes, thanks Yunus, thanks for asking me that. In fact, yesterday I was at Peter Maritzburg attending an event in memorial of comrade PG, and one of the guys came up to me and told me, don't ever forget Palestine. And he reminded me, don't ever forget Palestine, because you know, it is, as I mentioned on air, that it is the blessings of standing up for the people of Gaza that I believe and truly believe that today we are serving the people of South Africa in National Parliament. But before I answer that question, the president of ORA is sitting next to me, and he's just given me a message and a reminder. And again, this is connecting our people to the politicians. Tomorrow in our ward 31, at the Sparks Estate Community Center at 10 o'clock, the mayor, Councilor Cyril Taba will be there. And the Ward 31 residents, that is all of us here in Overport, in Sydenham, in Musgrave, are invited to an outreach program to engage with the mayor, where we will address issues of service delivery, issues of projects that are taking place. So it's a wonderful opportunity. Again, I'm saying to people, please guys, don't sit at home. Don't let this announcement go through 1 year and come out. Active citizenship means arrive there tomorrow, engage with the mayor, ask your questions, and don't just go to nitpick. Go there to contribute positively. I mean, just stick on that point. There was an outreach that the Itaquini billing section Metro did about 2 months ago. I called Abdul. I mean, I had an incorrect billing that was in excess of 20,000 Rand on my account, right? Yunus, and I didn't have the time to go through the process. I've just been so busy. Alhamdulillah, I took the time out. I went, I sat in the queue, and I managed to get my billing problem fixed up at an outreach program that took place at the same venue, which is a Sparks Estate Secondary School in Ward 31. So that's 10 o'clock
Just a
tomorrow.
reminder, where is this?
It's at the Sparks Estate Community Center, which is basically the Sparks Estate Secondary School. In maybe whilst Abdul can give us the physical address where it's actually taking place, but
And what time is it?
It's 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Right.
So that's
residents who have problems are encouraged to.
most certainly, please be there. And I intend, inshallah, in between looking at premises for my constituency office, which is one of my key PAs for tomorrow, I want to plan to visit here. So two things I think in relation to Palestine is very crucially important. Firstly, we know on Monday, October 7th, is the anniversary of the genocide, of 1 year of genocide. I would like to call it the 1 year of resilience and resistance of the brave people of Palestine, and 1 year of the genocide of the Zionists. And it cannot be an ordinary day. It cannot be business as usual for humanity. And what we want to say is that governments and United Nations may have failed the people of Palestine, but I can tell this with clarity. Alhamdulillah, the South African population, led by the African National Congress from the 6th administration and continuing into the 7th administration, which is what manifested by the state president holding the United Nations to task and saying that you need to change the United Nations Security Council so it represents the interests of all people of the world. Alhamdulillah, in South Africa, if there is ever a place that you want to be and you can be to stand with the people of Palestine, you want to be in South Africa. So inshallah, on Saturday, we are inviting on behalf of all the Palestinian solidarity organizations in Durban, we want to invite everyone to a march in solidarity with the people of Palestine. That's this Saturday at 1:30 p.m. at the Whalebone Pier in Umhlanga Ridge, in Umhlanga on the Umhlanga Promenade. That's, I think, very close to the Pearls. So that's 1:30 p.m. this Saturday at the Umhlanga at the pier. That's where we will start. It's about a 2-kilometer march. It's a place to be. Last but certainly not least, a very important developing factor, and everybody wants to do something. You know, I always say, what are you doing for the people of Palestine in your individual capacity? Are you at least raising your hands and making dua? Are you praying 2 rakats of Salatul Hajj? What are you doing? Are you stopping to drink that item that you're not supposed to be drinking? Are you boycotting? What are you doing? So if you want something to do tangibly, I'm giving you something to do. The Johannesburg City Council have made a motion to rename the Senton Drive to Leila Khalid Drive. There's 4,000 objections already been lodged by Zionists who are saying don't change it. And there is something for Palestinian activists to do. You must start sending in your support to the Johannesburg City Council to rename Senton Drive to Leila Khalid Drive. Please send it to the following email address: Dominicam, DOMINICAM, DOMINICAM at joburg.org.za. This is a call to action. It could be a 2-liner. I support the change to Leila Khalid Drive. Let us now, inshallah, after hearing this message on this beautiful show of yours, let us make sure we surpass 4,000 tonight. And inshallah, by the morning tomorrow, we want to know we are sitting with 10,000. And the address for tomorrow's engagement with Mayor Cyril Kaba is at 48 St. Teresa Road, Biria. And the president of ORA, who is sitting next to me, Abdul Valodia, says, please, everybody must be there. I'm also, incidentally, also an EXCO member of ORA. And this is where activism, Yunus, and you've always mentioned that we are sitting in national parliament, but it all started through activism for the people of Palestine, activism in the Ratepayers Association, activism in community projects, and that's how we are where we are today. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you, Imran. Some valuable information. Here you are, activism at a local level, please go there in large numbers. Please support the change of the street name so that, we can have an impact. We've ran out of time and so quickly, Cassim, 2 hours have gone. That's the nature of this particular program. We share valuable information. We continue to share that information. I want to thank Hassan Motala, our economist. He's always available to give us updates and really important updates on the economic sector. Nafeesa Kadwa, very good in terms of the worlds, but so much you could have said more, but time ran out. But we'll have you in future programs. Honorable Imran Subrathie MP is always available. Either he comes to the studio or we catch him in Parliament. He can't escape from Radio Al Ansar because he's an important contributor here. Councilor Remona Mckenzie is supposed to be present. She obviously had some issues with her mother who fell ill. She will be here in future programs. And Cassim Docrat, a former political science lecturer at UDW, prominent cricket administration. Maybe the next time we invite Cassim we'll talk about why South Africa is doing so bad in cricket and will there be an improvement, etc. But I just want to mention that one of our former MPs, brother Imam, Mansoor Sheikh, he had a quadruple bypass and he's still ill in hospital. And there's a request for us, our brothers, to make dua for him that he has a speedy recovery. He's been a political activist and a very active member in Parliament supporting the Palestinian issue. And we make duas that Allah gives him a speedy recovery and he's back live on radio in the future. On a closing note, now that we just 5 minutes past 10, we have the weapon for success. And the weapon is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with, various forms of ibadat to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our salah, which is absolutely compulsory and necessary. But the weapon of dua is a crucial weapon that Sahaba Ikram used when they went for various battles, whether it was a battle of Badr, battle of Yarmouk. Whenever they faced political uncertainty, any difficulty, they would at once resort to Rakat Salatul Hajjah, turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the help came, whether it came immediately or in the future, the help is there. So let us not forget our role as Muslims. The Radio Al Ansar, is there for the benefit of our communities, but the Al Ansar Foundation is a humanitarian organization that provides support from a humanitarian perspective for our people. We continue to provide the support, and our media network, we disseminate valuable information. So please keep tuned to Radio Al Ansar for update on various issues. And we come to the end of our program this evening, and inshallah next week, Wednesday, same time, we will continue with News in Focus. Until then, shukran to all our listeners for listening in, also in Facebook and in YouTube and other networks. We appreciate your listening. And to our listeners, avid listeners in Pietermaritzburg, shukran. We do have a radio office in Pietermaritzburg, and we will be having some live programs starting from next week from the Pietermaritzburg office. And we will be having a relaunch in Pietermaritzburg at the end of the month, where we will have all our presenters and staff to meet the Pietermaritzburg community from Raystop, Northdale, Allendale, Mountain Rise, and the various areas. So we look forward to meeting you all at the end of the month. Thank you to our technician. Until next week, Wednesday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.